An acclaimed trumpet player, composer, record label owner, and ever-traveling musician, Dave Smith is that rare audiophile who not only buys vintage gear, but who rebuilds his old-school audio gear finds to create what is a deeply beautiful narcotic hi-fi sound. The first shocker are Dave's speaker cabinets, measuring a colossal 24 inches deep by 26 inches wide by 66 inches high. Each 20 cubic foot cabinet holds a vintage Altec 604E coaxial driver wired to a Mastering Lab crossover set in Smith's own custom-built MLTL cabinets. The wow factor doesn't end there. Placed between the speaker cabinets on a custom-built rack is Smith's all-vintage, mostly rebuilt control rig consisting of two separate turntables. First, a RekOKut B12H turntable with a Shield RP12 tone arm and a Denon 103R cartridge, followed by a VPI HW19 MkII turntable with an Audio-Technica 1000F MkII tone arm and a very rare Fairchild 225A cartridge. Both of those go to a Harman Kardon XT3 step-up transformer. Dave is not anti-digital. His California Audio Labs Terset CD player handles CDs onto his H.H. Scott 130 preamplifier into two Radio Craftsmen Model 2 power amps. Dave most recently added another amplifier to his rig, a Deckware SE84C, a 2 watts per channel, single-ended with triode-connected EL84s. As an artist, Smith has released 3 records as a leader: Circumstance, Anticipation, and Impetus. Dave's sideman credits are extremely lengthy. He most recently performed with The Who at Madison Square Garden, but he's also the co-owner of the Brooklyn Jazz Underground record label. Smith has appeared on over 50 recordings, including those of Harry Connick, Alan Ferber, and Tom Jones.
I mean, I think I got into it, the old stuff. I mean, so many of the classic jazz recordings that I developed as a player listening to are recorded in 50s and 60s and like this time period. And something appeals to me about the idea of listening to records, through a playback system that is probably very, very similar, and maybe some components are identical to what they were recorded or mastered on. The vintage stuff, what's cool about it, first of all, it's surprisingly good, where I think tastes have changed since 1959, but I don't think quality of things has particularly changed appreciably. Digital recording is obviously a very different ballgame, but a top-of-the-line system from 1959 or thereabouts, or even before, is going to sound stunning, I think, to anybody today, if it's in good shape, properly set up, in good condition, working the way they were designed to work. It sounds fantastic. And I would say that generally, what I think what appeals to me about this specific era is this was a time when you look at like old magazine ads from Fairchild or RekOKut or Scott or any of these companies, and their selling point is the quality of their equipment, and it's going to last forever, and this is like a cost no object exercise. You've asked me to pull out some records that I thought were particularly important to me, and I chose ones that were particularly relevant to me as a trumpet player and also as a musician, and just kind of maybe that in my past impacted me particularly strongly. I'll start with this one right here. And this is one where this is certainly not for the audio quality. This is Clifford Brown and Max Roach live at the Hive, and I heard about this record many years ago, and one of the reasons I chose this was Clifford Brown was probably my first really big influence as a trumpet player. When I was early in my development I listened to a couple of Clifford Brown records sort of exclusively for a couple of years, and I just learned all these solos, and definitely his playing is the foundation of my playing. And while I was getting into him, I kept hearing about this record live at the Beehive. Now, back then, this is of course ancient history, the only way you could get it was on LP. This is a live recording from 1955, and this is the, you know, the famous band. But it's a little bit unusual. The reason it's so special to me is that, so the thing is that this band, you know, had all these studio recordings, and the studio recordings are remarkable, and Clifford Brown's solos all sound like immaculate. They're all perfect. Every note is perfect. Wow. They're just short and sweet and perfect, you know, and that's like amazing in its own right. But hearing him live is a whole different ball game. And on this record, he's stretching out and he's playing these long solos, 5, 6, 7 minute solos. Wow. Which I mean, the longest solo on any of the studio records is like a minute or something, you know. And so you get to hear him in a way that's very different than the studio stuff. And it's unbelievable improvising. Like the last 2 tracks in particular, I mean, they're all great. And there's a 21-minute version of Cherokee at 400 beats per minute, which is like crazy, much faster than the studio record. The last 2 tracks are Woody and You and Hot House. And those 2 solos are, I mean, some of the greatest improvising I know of. And it's these long, really intensely developed solos where you don't just hear all this perfect playing. I mean, it's also, you can hear that quality in it, but you hear this development in the solo where he's exploring this idea and then taking it to this, and he's like chorus after chorus expanding on this idea. And it's really remarkable. The other thing that's interesting about this record is that, so this band, you know, this like iconic band of the 1950s for the short couple of years that they recorded, the original saxophone player was Harold Land, who's from West Coast LA, I think.
Was it George Morrow on bass?
George Morrow, yeah, exactly.
I remember that.
Well done.
I don't remember anything.
And Richie Powell, Bud Powell's brother, on piano.
Right.
And so Harold Land, the night of this gig, this is the Beehive in Chicago, had to go out to LA to deal with some family business or something. They invited to sit in with the band a young tenor player named Sonny Rollins. And this was the night that was basically his audition with this band. And basically, the short story is he replaced Harold Land. Huh. And this band became that much more iconic with Sonny Rollins. I mean, he's shredding, and it's you know, this is his audition night with the band. So it's kind of like, it's a very historically interesting recording that way. And I mean, that stuff is super cool, and Sonny Rollins sounds great on it, and Max sounds great on it. But for me, it's like these extended, developed Clifford Brown solos, you know, that you hear stories about, like Charlie Parker, for example, like stretching out and taking long solos, and you know, you just can't find evidence of, you know, there's so few recordings of that kind of thing. Right. But with this, you know, you hear him really stretching out and really developing, and it gives a whole different light on the brilliance of his improvising. So those solos really deeply impacted me. This happens to be one of my favorite trumpet players, and somebody that really, I feel, kind of set me on the course of where I went. Where, you know, I began as you know, really deeply into Clifford Brown and that whole approach, but I never felt like I could play that way, honestly. Like, it wasn't me to play like Clifford Brown. I loved his playing, and I loved aspects of it, but it never felt like me. I was fortunate for a year, this is when I was still in Toronto, to study with Charles Tolliver. Came up for 1 year and taught up there. And I studied with him, and that had a lot of impact on me. And one of the things he told me was, check out Booker Little. And I had never even heard the name. I didn't know anything about him, and so I learned a solo from one of his records with, it was his first record with, or I guess maybe it's the second record, with Max Roach's band, where he's playing Milestones, the bebop tune. And that solo just like freaked me out, and so I started checking out Booker Little, and like Clifford Brown died tragically young. He died even younger. I think he was 23 when he died. Recording career of like 3 years long, and similar to Clifford Brown, I guess. He met and studied with Clifford Brown a little bit, and so he was like coming out of that thing, and he was also coming out of the, he was studying at conservatory in Chicago and coming out of the classical fundamentals approach, which was also the same as Clifford Brown. But and interestingly, I guess dovetailing with the other record, he was roommates with Sonny Rollins when he was in Chicago.
Crazy.
So Booker Little, for me, I mean, he's an amazing trumpet player, a great trumpet player, but he is much more musician-minded philosophy. Booker was much more open-minded than, he was kind of, he had one foot in the late 50s hard bop thing that coming out of the Max Roach band, and he had one foot in the avant-garde thing that was emerging in the 60s. And he had this way of straddling the two, where he was playing lines and playing bebop material, but he was open to, there's some quotes about him saying there's no such thing as a wrong note. Everything is, a dissonance is a dissonance, and it's a sound, and it's, and so his music and playing is much more adventurous than the hard bop players of the 50s. And so it's that originality and open-mindedness, and I think also the fact that, he's an unbelievable trumpet player, but his philosophy is kind of musician first and trumpet player second. So Booker Little really opened my mind up to that, which ultimately led me, I feel, to find my own kind of approach that works for me. And this record is maybe my favorite Booker Little. There's a lot of composition involved, and there's some great trumpet playing on here, but it's really about the overall album and also the flow of the album, where there's, the middle track is Man of Words, and it's like this drone repetitive kind of thing where he's just like playing plaintively over top. And it's such a deep musical moment coming out of everything that came before. So for me, it's a really special record. It's one of my favorite albums, musically, bar none. This is a great original mono pressing, and it sounds great too.